Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Adult Forum on advanced healthcare directives. I'm going to share my experience as a chaplain at Bozeman Health, and we have Dr. Leah Anderson from Bozeman Creek Family Medicine to give a doctor's perspective on healthcare directives. I encourage you to look at the website prepareforyourcare.org. It's the website I'm using to walk through this particular document with you. It has videos and kind of step-by-step instructions. You can even create your own account, fill in your information, and then print that up and have it scanned into your medical chart or copies given to family and friends. The nice thing about having a website dedicated to this document is it makes preparing the document much easier. But I've handed some of you a paper copy of that, so you can refer to that as we walk through the document. But before we move ahead, let's begin with the prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we come before you as people made in your image, aware of our humanity, aware of our mortality. Help us as Christians to embrace our identity as your creatures, and that our life has a finite span. Help us, Spirit, as we have this conversation about healthcare decisions that affect us and our family and friends. We humbly ask that you would bless us in this task. We pray these things in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Preparing an advanced healthcare directive helps you to make medical decisions for yourself and others. It encourages you to talk with your primary caregivers, including your doctors, and to get the medical care that is right for you. I've seen in many situations patients and their families not prepared to have these conversations because it wasn't discussed ahead of time, or events happened so fast that they had no time to kind of begin to understand what was happening to themselves or families for their loved ones. In many ways, this document helps you talk about or discuss with your family and friends what might happen to you and what might be your response. But then also to be directed by your input or by the input of your family, the kind of medical care that you want. I was sharing with some of you before we started. There was a case where a patient was cared for who had no immediate family present, and the only people who were there at bedside were friends and those who had worked with the patient. And the attending physician had asked, I've gathered you here all together because we want to know what the patient would want. And so collectively, we had to help make decisions for care of this patient. It was a very difficult process. If the patient had had this document, it would have made it much easier for those caring for this patient what they actually would want in their care. I think in the end, we did the best we could. But the great thing about this document is it walks through a process in which you name someone to make medical decisions for you, what kind of care that you want, and make those wishes known. So this healthcare directive has 5 steps to it. Choosing a medical decision maker, deciding what matters most in life to you, choosing flexibility for your decision maker, telling others about your wishes, and then asking the doctors the right questions. Leah, if you have at any point you want to input, just interject. So. Oh, come on, iPad. So your decisions will be determined by what kind of person you are. You may be healthy, you may be dealing with some serious health issues. You may have some concern about medicine or surgery. Some decisions you may need to make if you become very seriously ill. So choosing a medical decision maker. Let's watch the video.
Thinking about this kind of stuff was scary, and you sort of said it. Then I realized that I didn't have to make any final decisions. All I had to do was get started by choosing someone to help make medical decisions for me in the future. That part seemed fairly easy to do, and wasn't so scary.
So why choose a medical decision maker? Because of accidents or illness. 3 out of 4 people will not be able to make some of their own medical decisions at some point in their life. Doctors need to know who can make the decision for you. A medical decision maker is someone who can make medical decisions for you. They would only make decisions for you if you're too sick to make your own decisions. But you can ask this person to start making decisions for you whenever you want, even now. So it's good to have those conversations with folks around you. Has anyone here in the room have you designated someone to make medical decisions for you? Do you wish to share? Oh, go ahead.
I have my decision maker, and I got everything done with Dr. Omo Hunda before I had surgery. He took care of all that.
Okay.
And my decisions are hanging on the refrigerator, so if somebody comes to give me help, they'll know what to do and what not to do.
Right.
Yeah, we
both have. Yeah, I wonder if I misunderstood your question. We both have designated healthcare directives, so we've never had to actually make each other's decisions.
Okay.
I was just looking at my records at Bozeman Health, and Dan and I are listed as emergency contacts and spouse and all that, and I figured that I will turn to him first.
Mhm.
Is that a fair assumption? Without any of this?
Assuming he's around.
Yeah.
Assuming he's around, yeah.
Yeah.
And that you're not like in Colorado and in accident situation or that. Like that's the bugger, I
Yeah.
think, is
Mhm.
when healthcare happens not at home.
Yeah. Well, I'm never going to go to Colorado then.
Well,
Dangerous place, dangerous.
Well, and right now, I'm speaking not as an employee of Bozeman Health, but as someone who's worked in the system and is observing the system. We had to go to a new electronic charting system,
That's why I
which
looked.
has had its share of snafus. So, yes, it has. I would strongly encourage you, when you meet with your provider at Bozeman Health, to double check that if you filled out this document or named emergency contact, that it's actually there in the chart. I'm embarrassed to say that some information has not transferred from the old software to the new software. And believe me, it's created headaches for providers as well as those who work in a clinical setting. And I've heard from some of you your frustration with the system. So I'm not apologetic about it at all. It's turned into a snafu beyond snafus. But yeah, please double check.
I used to do those data conversions, that's why I needed it.
It was you.
Yeah, in Epic and other systems, yeah, so I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, my PCP, and I don't know if this was system-wide or not, but I had an appointment a few weeks ago, it was less than a week after the changeover, and the new form invited me to check in ahead of time online, and I thought, oh, that's good. And I basically ended up having to complete my entire medical history from scratch to check in, which I guess is one good way to do it. I was a little irritated since it took me about 40 minutes to do that, but then I realized that staffing issues better meet than to put the strain on already overloaded staff in the healthcare system.
Who's far less interested in keeping the details accurate, unfortunately.
And it's okay if you're not ready. Some people are ready to choose and some are not. It's also okay if you can't think of anyone right now to take on this role. The Prepare for Your Care website and the video stories can help you get medical care that's right for you. And the doctor there basically repeats what we just said.
So can I ask?
Sure.
So if you don't have that filled out, you said that in your situation that you were involved in, they gathered friends, and is that typically what happens if there isn't one?
Well, that was
Again, like as best as one can, right?
right.
Or
Well,
does your
it was driven by
doctor
the
just
fact
have to
that we
make
couldn't-
decisions?
We couldn't contact the patient's next of kin.
Right.
We really had to work hard and be persistent in that, but that happened much later, in the patient's care. And in my experience, that was an exception. Normally, we're able to have a conversation.
And usually when in doubt, like, things err on the side of continuing, right?
Yes.
Continuing life support. And so usually when the conversations are being had, it's like day 7, like no indication of viable return, right? And usually within 7 days you figure out somebody somewhere, right? I think the greater concern is that people do have strong feelings to not be resuscitated. They need to understand that without like very blatant documentation, like you're going to get a tube down your throat and and put on life support, and usually until either it is clearly futile or they're able to identify folks.
Thank you.
That's the default.
Mrs. Jones, your husband is very sick. He has a serious lung infection and he's not breathing well right now. So we're going to need to move him to the intensive care unit.
Intensive care unit?
He's very sick, and because he's not able to talk right now, you are his legal decision maker.
He never told me what he wanted. We never discussed this. 1 month later.
I'm glad you're feeling better, Mr. Jones. Your time in the hospital was difficult on all of us.
Especially me.
As doctors, we want to be sure to follow our patients' wishes. But if they're not able to tell us themselves, then we need to be able to talk to someone who really understands what they want and can share it.
I was so upset that day, I just couldn't think.
That's why it's so important to discuss your wishes beforehand and to ask someone to be your medical decision maker.
James is a pretty independent person. I never make decisions for him. I just didn't know what he would want.
You know, I always assumed my wife would just know what I wanted and she would make the right decision.
I wish we had talked about it. I mean, now that James has asked me to be his medical decision maker and we started to talk about what's important to him, I feel so much better. More prepared. I know what James wants, and I know that I have his permission to make decisions for him.
I feel better too, for her and
Someone call the academy.
Sorry, isn't that a really awful example? Like, if his, like, directive had been, like, I don't think I want, like, intensive life-saving efforts, wouldn't his directive have basically taken him, like, not put him in the ICU?
Well, and that's when.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
here's
a
a
great
great
example.
example.
You didn't have one, so you're still alive. But otherwise, if only you had chosen.
And so most like do not resuscitate are like if we have someone who is on like frank hospice,
Okay.
it'll be clear not only do not resuscitate, but do not give me antibiotics if I get sick, or if I have a UTI, or if I have a pneumonia. Like if there's a window out in this life, please allow me to pass, right? And so that's like a step further than a do not resuscitate. But most of the time, even with the DNR, we will still advance care as appropriate. So like if someone is not doing well and they may not need intubation, but maybe they need like a continuous pressure oxygen mask or something, and they want the pneumonia treated with an antibiotic IV, and they need increased nursing care, then it would still be appropriate to like move them to the ICU, even if they're a DNR. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just seemed like if there was a chance he was going to get better, like, shouldn't he just be going there anyways? Like, you don't, like,
Totally.
okay.
This situation also can vary from state to state, both by state law and by culture within the healthcare system in the states. I've spent some time in state culture from here, and one of the things that we learned years ago, my father was in an emergency situation, and my mother was distraught, and they were shoving forms in front of her face to sign, and she was about to sign a variation of the DNR. Unfortunately, my father's longtime physician, the guy had been taking care of my father for 20 years, just told him, don't do that, you'll tie my hands. Let's leave me free to work with you as the situation progresses. So in all of this, I think that's an important consideration. I know there are circumstances under which I would not want to be resuscitated, but if I'm out cold and my personal rep is not a medical professional, I'd much rather be able to get some guidance from Leah on what are the odds, what does it look like we might try to do here, rather than Leah not being able to do anything because I signed away her ability to do that.
So a medical decision maker can be a family member or friend, a group of people with one person who will speak to the doctors for the group. The patient example that I gave earlier, there were about 15 of us, and we decided amongst ourselves who would speak for the entire group. If you're unable to make your own decisions, your decision maker may need to talk to the doctors to say yes or no to medical treatments for you and decide where you get medical care, such as a nursing home or hospital. So what makes a good decision maker? 18 years or older, can talk to you about your wishes, can be there for you when you need them, for you to trust your wishes and to do what's best for you. To trust to know your medical information and your health history, and is not afraid to ask doctors questions and to speak up about your wishes. It's interesting to see how personalities play out under great duress, trying to gain information from providers. We're working at the clinical end to be much more receptive to somebody who perhaps is not confrontational or is bold enough to speak, to listen and pay attention to those nuances when someone's trying to make a point about what their loved one would want. But it's, you're working with humans, and sometimes it's a challenge. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip through the video. Again, I'll refer to the website so that if you wish to see these Academy-nominated performances, you can look at them at your leisure. So when I was previewing this document, this website earlier, yes, I can think of family or friends who may make medical decisions for me. And then you need to be able to name those individuals and how are they related to you or your relationships with them. And to be able to name who you don't want to make decisions.
Right on.
Especially with blended families and family dynamics and sometimes the dysfunction of families.
Affirming or not affirming,
Yeah.
believe me,
It's
it's bad.
It may not be the blood relative or who makes the best decision for you.
There's got to be a whole bunch of really hard stories behind somebody's decision to include that on this form. Like, that is an addition more of hard experience.
Well, and I think about some of my grandpa, he needed to pass from this life, and his wife, my grandmother, like, she shouldn't have been the one to be like, no, we're still pushing, like, I wanted to be like, Grandma, leave the room for a second, right? Because it was like her heartache was the thing that was driving decisions for someone who needed to be done, right? And I think that's a fairly common experience, where like the objectivity just can't be, right?
Yeah, and sometimes as a provider, I have to remind myself, oh, right, the last time this person was in the hospital was when they delivered their baby. That I have to be reminded of some of the stressors people are under and some of their emotional response. COVID has especially complicated some of this because some of our patients have lost multiple family members to friends. And so to come back, when they're battling COVID, just brings back that flood of experiences which have been excruciating. No wonder we're seeing the attrition rate that we are in healthcare. It's just a story from my own experience. So for your decision maker, do you only want them to make decisions when you're sick? Or do you want them to make decisions even though you can make decisions on your own now? Or you're not sure? If you don't want decisions for them to make, you can name that specifically. So there is some flexibility in this document. So if you're not ready to name a medical decision maker, it's okay. So you need to be able to find a time and place in which to do it. Make sure the person understands what you're asking them to do. sometimes folks may not be prepared to have that awesome responsibility placed on their shoulders. May want to give them time to think about it, then you can ask them again, or as Pastor Lindeen likes to remind us, no is a perfectly acceptable answer. The person you approach may say, no, I'm not prepared to take on that role. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to be zipping through these video performances. So this is just for review. And then an action plan is a promise that you made to yourself to take action. So here are some real steps that you can do. Name a medical decision maker. Ask someone to be that decision maker, and then to put your wishes in writing on an advance draft. So if you're able to do that, we can move on to step 2. What matters most to you in life? We'll be looking over some questions as to what matters for you and for your medical care. So, what's important? Family, friends, pets, your hobbies, working or volunteering, caring for yourself and being independent, not being a burden on your family. I hear that a lot in the clinical setting. Religion, spirituality, what feeds your spirit. Something else that's not on this list, or I'm not sure. What brings your life joy? Sometimes in the clinical setting, we can, if we know ahead of time what lifts this person's spirits, we'll try as providers to create an environment which will help someone under our care. Thinking about past life experiences can help you decide what's most important to you. Here are some questions to ponder. Have you had your own experience with serious illness? Do you remember someone who was very, very sick or dying? Do you remember seeing someone on TV who was very sick or dying? Think about what went well and what did not go well. If you were in these situations, what would you want for yourself? I think about my own father's illness and death. The fact that my brother called me ahead of time to be able to meet with my father while he was still lucid. That we gathered his family around his bedside to be able to have a conversation. And then, in 2 short weeks, he was on hospice, and he was not conscious. But we were by his bedside. We were with him. I'm so glad a sibling took the initiative to get me there, and then to get me there again, to be with him. Some people like to endure their serious illness alone. Some want to be surrounded by family. But it's helpful to know that ahead of time, when you and family are trying to make arrangements. So what matters most in life can help you choose the medical care that's right for you. Like, for example, I would want, a chaplain or, my pastor to come visit me. If they weren't able to, then I would want someone to come in their place. That's important to me. Think about what's right for you. So quality of life matters for each person. For some people, the main goal is to be kept alive for as long as possible, even if they have to be kept alive on machines. Who here knows what a Lucas machine is? It's a machine that helps you breathe. It takes place of CPR. And it is the most disturbing sight, I would say. Just seeing this machine trying to help keep someone alive. I know with CPR, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leah, that CPR can break ribs.
I've done it.
You've done it. Yeah.
Broke a rib.
So when
Of my husband.
so when the family says, we want CPR done on Grandma who's 97, are you aware that Grandma will have broken ribs after this procedure? Oh no, we wouldn't want that for Gladys. I'm going to let my family know if I'm at a certain age and it's recommended that CPR be done. I said, no, let's not face descent in that condition. For some folks, the main goal is to focus on quality of life and being comfortable. These people would prefer a natural death and not be kept alive on machines. And some folks are somewhere in between. So only you can decide, do you want extraordinary measures taken? Do you not want any measures taken at all? Do you kind of walk the middle road? That's up to you. Leah, have you seen cases like this in terms of?
In fact, I was joking on the way over here that every time I would admit a patient to the hospital, it would be, and this is an important point too, it's physician orders that are followed above and beyond any documentation, because a lot of times people don't have their document on file at hospitals. So when I'm admitting a patient, the last part of my conversation before I go finish my orders is a DNR conversation, right? And I joke because it's 2 in the morning and it's the 5th admission of the night and you just want to go to bed and you're like, oh boy, here we go. Okay, sir, I need to document if something happens in the middle of the night, do you want me to come put a tube down your throat and start chest compressions? Well, you'd be like, oh, it depends, which is a very appropriate feeling to have, right? But 2 in the morning with someone you've never met who's in a hurry, right, becomes a difficult time. And so most people, I feel like, are like, oh, well, it depends. And to your point about, we're no longer in a generation where the person who's known you for 20 years is the one who's writing the orders most of the time. Most healthcare settings now have hospitalists. And so, it's a sadness to me that I'm usually not the one writing orders or caring for my patients anymore. And it means I sleep at night. But to that end, the person who is writing your admission orders is usually going to have never met your person or you, right? And so if there is sort of this gray zone, it's really important that you're able to think about the gray and document the gray. So that at 2 in the morning when you're trying to explain the gray to someone, it's not the first time you've thought about it and it's in writing so that records and physician orders can be written in a way that honors that. Yeah, we make it this dichotomous thing, but for most people it's not.
So question 3, how do you feel about your quality of life and goals for medical care today in your current health? So mark on the graph which is most important to you. For me, it's equally important. Question 4, how do you feel about your quality of life and the goals for medical care at the end of life? At this stage of my life, they're equally important to keep me alive as long as possible and to focus on quality of life. In my Uncle Bud's life, he had a chronic lung condition which froze the sacs in his lungs. And Bud loved gardening. Bud loved to get out and do things. And his doctor recommended to me, Bud, you need full oxygen. That required having a 40-pound tank next to it. And Bud said, no, I want to garden. I'll stick with the 5-pound tank. So Bud was able to stay mobile while he was being treated for his lung condition. But his condition deteriorated. Now, granted, he died from another condition, but that was his choice. That's what he wanted his family to know, and that's how it was. And that's how it was honored. So at the end of life, some people are willing to live through a lot for a chance of living longer. Others know that certain things would be very hard on the quality of life. Those things may want them to focus more on comfort rather than to live long as possible. So at the end of life, which of these things would be very hard on your quality of life? And I checked off a number that were important to me. Being in a coma, not being able to live without being hooked up to machines, not being able to think for myself, not being able to feed, bathe, or care for myself, and having constant, severe pain or discomfort. And then if you want, you can write why you feel this way. I need to prepare for worship, but you're invited to stay here and continue to have a conversation about this document before worship begins. Thank you for coming here this morning. I wish I had more time to go through this, but again, I encourage you to go to the website, prepareforyourcare.org. It's down on the corner there of your document. And like I said earlier, you can fill this out online, print it up, have it scanned into your chart. Talk about it with your family and friends and your providers so that they know.
Is there a way to electronically transfer there? Like, does it give you the option to like save it as a file?
I would assume now, because this presentation was prepared a couple of years ago at the University of California. So, yeah. So, thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would also add, my understanding is that in the state of Montana, these do not need to be notarized.
Correct.
So some people, I've seen patients who are paralyzed with this document at home and not disseminated because they're like, well, I haven't had a chance to get it notarized yet. And I was like, even a half-done document is more valuable than, nothing. So I try to remind folks, like, this can be a dynamic thing. If you get in a fight with your sister tomorrow and decide you don't want her to be your medical decision maker anymore, like, you can change it, right? And so I think a lot of people defer filling it out because they're just not sure. And it would be better to fill out the things you do have the answer about and have an incomplete document that you can later go back and change or add to than to like hold off until you think it's perfect and you know exactly what you want, right? Some guidance is better than.
Well, yeah, I like your report of the it depends response.
Yeah.
Because
for most of us it does.
Yeah. Well, it depends. What are my chances, Doc? So is there any way you know of in these forms to put in and it depends kind of?
Yeah, and in fact, so I've used, in my time as a doc, I've used probably 3 different documents to help people advanced directives, and this is actually the first time I've seen this one, and I like it. I've usually done like the 5 wishes form, which is similar, but a lot of them make it like A or B, right? And this document actually impresses me because in a lot of them, it does give you this middle ground
The
option.
sliding scale.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in truth, if I was, honestly, if I filled this out today, I would probably have a little bit more of the gray options on some of these things. And honestly, like, the gray option should be referred to the admitting physician as like a yes, we call it full code, right? Full code, like, yes, resuscitate me, but please recognize in my document that I would want to be taken off of life support within a day or two if these conditions were met, where I'm brain dead, it's very clear that I have very low chances